Thank you for tuning into the Texas Scratch King Game Dog channel. Interview giving by Fat Bill. To the legendary Floyd Boudreaux. Did you know that his daddy had bulldogs for more than 40 years? How many of us can say without exaggeration that he played an important role in his friendship and dealings with dogmen like Leo Kennard, George Sattler, Joe Corvino, Maurice Carver and others? Floyd Boudreaux is without a doubt a very knowledgeable dogman and has bred, raised and handled some of the best ever to cross a pit. Stay with us and listen to the living legend Mr. Floyd Boudreaux. What was your first dog and when was the first time for you to leave Louisiana with these dogs to fight into something other than local competition? I remember my first dog was a brindle female. Her name was Flossie. I started at a very young age. But the first time for me to fight a dog in the fast lane must have been when I took Stagger Lee to San Antonio to one of Maurice Carver's shows. I went into a guy named Steven and he had a dog called Rojo. We had that dog beat. But he kept pushing his dog into the corner with his knees each time when it was his time to scratch. Maurice was the referee and I said, "Gentlemen, be sure not to push your dog anymore. You have pushed him for the last time." If I wouldn't have said anything that time, who knows what might have happened. How well did you know Carver? Pretty good. I saw a lot of his shows and gave him some dogs. But I never really did much business with him. He was a nice looking man and he could tell a story like no other. I remember Maurice and Mr. Jolly, from South Texas, came here one time in 1955 and they were driving a red Thunderbird convertible. You had to push the car to start it and they had a big black dog named Butch with them. He jumped out of the car and was running to the highway and we had to catch him. Maurice told me he started with the dogs in 1946. 1 year after I fought my first dog. He and his friend Jolly went to Louisiana to fight that wino dog that was owned by Jolly. After the fight Jolly sold the dog over here and Maurice was so angry with him that he refused to drive back to Texas with Jolly in the same car. Maurice knew a lot of good dog people and he would watch the hot young dogs in somebody's backyard. If you had something he liked he would try to talk you out of it and then start selling them. I saw him fight a few good ones. But he never did fight many dogs and a lot of times he would come in overweight. One time, he was matched into Mayfield and came in overweight. But Mayfield said he would fight anyway. Carver refused and then sold his dog. That's how Carver was. Maurice was always trying to make money with the dogs. Do you think he misrepresented those papers to keep that a secret? I'm sure he did to some degree. But in those days it was pretty much common knowledge that he did. And everybody that needed to know knew about it. I did. He bred to my blind Billy dog and that's how he got Ironhead, Boomerang, and others. They came out of my stuff. He told us that Boomerang was out of Ironhead. You see, Maurice would exaggerate a lot. All the time, and he was smart enough to tell you a lie. Don't get me wrong. Maurice was a nice guy. He told me one time that he worked for the Mexican government, the Border Patrol, and even told my wife he worked for the Foreign Legion. But one thing is sure, he was a hell of a ladies' man and could convince you that black was blue. He sure was a good salesman. What was the best dog you ever owned? They ask me that all the time. It's tough to answer but I think I'm partial to my Beau's dog. I probably had a few that were as good. But I always liked him a lot. He won 27 rolls for me and he was always the smaller dog but they couldn't beat him. He also won one contracted fight. One time, Jerry Clemens and Douglas Nyrider brought a dog that was 19 pounds bigger than Beau's. And that big dog would bite through car tires when we put them down. It was a joke. Beau's was a fast, hard-mouthed dog. He would fight high in the shoulder and destroy a dog quick. During the daytime he would usually sleep with the puppies around the house and I always thought he was a little shy. Just like blind Billy. One time he won a fight on in just 6 minutes. That was in New Orleans. We had 10 matches that day and he beat a dog out of Jerome Hernandez's. He just whacked the dog. It was no contest. Beau's was out of scrub and candy. After that fight they claimed that their dog wasn't conditioned. I don't know. But mine was ready to fight. I matched against Jerome 3 times and won twice. Jerome was a dogman and hard to beat. What is the last dog you matched? I guess that was the cactus dog from Grady Cummings about 15 years ago. This dog quit in 28. He had quit before but I didn't know that at the time and nobody told me about this until we were about to wash the dogs for the fight. Atlas Brewer came up to me and said, "Do you want to know something about that dog?" I said I appreciate that. But it is a little late. We had our money up and I wasn't trying to be rude. But if a man wants to help me then help me from the get-go. I would never let a man start conditioning a dog if I knew the dog was a cur. But it happened. Mr. Boudreaux, I want you to tell your full story on the old Eli dog. How he was bred, his parents, his pups and so on. I will tell you the true story as it is. And I have witnesses that can tell you this is the truth. If this is not right I'm the brother of Martin Luther King. It makes me mad that they got the story of him and his sons Bullison and Eli Jr. turned around. Not for myself. I know better. I lived it, but the future generation that is coming behind us doesn't know anything about the truth and have to rely on what they are reading. That's why I am so glad I can do this interview in the Times. It takes a small man to lie and change a story. I am telling the truth about how them dogs are bred, just like I always told before. Eli was a pretty good individual, and after his match against Jack Smith in Cleveland, I brought him home. We doctored him up, and then a sheriff from Mississippi tried to buy him. But I wouldn't sell him. Then, the next day, Raymond Holt of Texas and his wife Sharon came by to buy him, but I gave Eli to my friend Junior Bush from Alabama. He loaned Eli to John Cotton from Chattanooga, Tennessee. They were friends at the time, and that's where somebody stole Eli. I gave Eli to Junior because he is a real high-class dogman. A good example for a lot of other, so-called, dogmen. When Eli got stolen, Cotton gave Junior $1,000 and told him to go and buy another dog. He said that if there was a dog he liked that cost more, he would make up the difference. There are a lot of stories about what happened after this. When Eli got stolen from Chattanooga, I think he went from Chattanooga to Memphis. And from there on, I just don't know for sure, but I feel that some of that bunch in Memphis had something to do with it. I just don't know what happened with Eli, but I feel very strong about this. And I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it myself. I truly believe that Eli was also the sire of that grand champion Zebo dog. They were too much alike not to be true. At one time I gave a nice red puppy to Jerry Clemens. He is a friend of mine and I still think a lot of the man. He took the pup, kept him for 6 weeks and then sold the pup. He came here and I gave him another pup that I had here in the blacksmith shop. I called that pup Spook. She was out of a litter that killed each other when they were still very young. He kept her for about 2 months at the most. When she came in season for the first time, he brought her back and I bred her to Ellis. They had 4 pups, 3 black and 1 brindle. 2 males and 2 females. One of the males was Bullison. The other was Eli Jr. And the brindle was Brendy. She bit the hardest of them all and she was the biggest. She could break a dog down in less than 3 minutes. Brendy was awesome. A bad bulldog. As baa as a man has ever seen. She beat a dog one time like she was having breakfast. I've never seen anything like her again. The other female in the litter out of Spook and Eli was a black bitch named Lady. She was my kind of dog and I think the best in the litter. Both Bullison and his brother Eli Jr. were exceptional bulldogs. They were the cream of the crop. Top-notch bulldogs that went into some tough competition to make history. Bullison was a good dog. But he was not as good as Eli Jr. Eli Jr. was a much better producer. He was just not bred to good selected bitches. But he was definitely a better dog than Bullison. He didn't care if he was getting bit because he was going to bite you. Red Walling was the owner of Bullison when he was matched into his son, Benny Bob. Maurice conditioned him. But he was not fit to fight. This is what happened. Maurice had Bullison and bred him to a bitch named Beth at his place. A few weeks after that, Bullison got bit by a rattlesnake and his head was as big as a Texas hat. Also, there was this big old dog at Maurice's place that got off his chain. And Bullison, who was in a kennel, was fighting with this dog through the fence and messed up his teeth and gums. Just before the fight with Benny Bob, we checked his blood count and it was down to 33. Benny Bob was a brindle dog and Bullison a black dog. The match was at 52 pounds, but Bullison was only 48 or 49-pound dog. The fight was reported in Pete Sparks magazine and also in the book that Mayfield put out, but it was not until Mayfield wrote that little book called, well, I can't remember, but he came out with all that nonsense about a black dog against a white dog. I think he was confused by another match between Danny Burton, who had a black 54-pound dog, and Raymond Holt, who had a white dog called Lightning IV, who was owned by a black man named Chris. Eli Jr. was sold to Douglas Nyrider when he was 17 months old for $400. He won his first match on a broken leg in Oklahoma. If Bullison would have been in good shape against Benny Bob, I think that would have been a hell of a fight. One time, I had a dog called Napoleon and I rolled him with Bullison when he was at my place. Bullison was an 18-pound bigger dog, but Napoleon held his own for a little while. It didn't go very long because Bullison was coming on hard. Later I won with Napoleon and the same show when Bullison won over that Sir dog that was handled by Bert Klaus. I remember one incident with Bullison when he was at my place. Jerry Clemens brought the dog to me to be tested, and one day while I was cleaning up around his chain, he tried to bite me. Before he could put his mouth on me, I hit him hard with a shovel and knocked him out. After this happened, he never, at my place, tried to bite anyone again. If a dog is a man-biting dog, I don't like them, and if they try to bite me or my family, it's a dead dog. Jerry had Bullison when he was a young dog and he was sort of hyper. On the subject of schooling, how did you go about this? I don't think you can change a dog a whole lot after he is born. All you can do is sharpen his ability a little bit, but you can't make him game. Now people say that it is a risk to breed a young untested bitch. Well, I bred Spook her first time in heat. She was never tried before, but she produced some exceptional dogs. I think it is like this, they have the genetic ability to produce good. Or they don't. No matter how they are themselves. There is just one ace in every 100 or so, and the rest are just mediocre dogs. That's something you always have to keep in mind.